Our next speaker is Rob Boase, and he is the Landcare Volunteer winner for 2017 Biodiversity Crisis. He has been very passionate about the natural environment all his life. First shown when he was 2 years of age, and he disappeared into the bush, resulting in a widespread search. He was very surprised to win the WA Individual Land Carer for 2017, and as he has never been one for public speaking, he says he would rather run barefoot through a paddock of double Gs instead of speaking. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks for that introduction. I'm going to be talking much about the same sort of things that's been talked about today, but maybe I've got a few different angles to some of those subjects. Anybody that knows me knows that to stand up here and speak to a group of people like this, it's either got to be a subject that I'm really passionate about, or I'm asked by somebody that I really respect and admire, and Rachel's ticked both boxes there. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Eward land, the Collins ancestors, and I pay my respects to the past and present custodians. We in the southwest of WA are fortunate to live right in the middle of one of only 20 biodiversity hotspots on the planet. WA contains the oldest exposed landmass in the world, and we, along with the rest of Australia, have been isolated since breaking away from Gondwana land about 100 million years ago. Our part of the country has had no volcanic or glacial activity for hundreds and hundreds of millions of years, which has resulted in extremely nutrient-poor soils and very leached soils. Our unique plants have evolved some amazing diversity and adaptations to not only survive in this harsh conditions, but and thereby producing the amazing biodiversity of our part of the state, and the reason why we're known as the wildflower state. Some of the adaptations producing the incredible diversity that we have are so bizarre that even science fiction would be hard to come up with stories like them. But we're not here to talk about that today, so I'll carry on. One of the misconceptions common with visitors to our state is that the current vast displays of colourful annuals is the reason we're called the wildflower state. Although this is definitely part of it, the main reason for the incredible number and diversity of plants throughout the southwest is the reason we're called the wildflower state. What we see above the ground is only part of the biodiversity story. It's been estimated that there are something like 20 or 30 tonnes of organisms living beneath each hectare of healthy bushland. And the majority of those are fungi and bacteria. It's another subject that we could talk for hours and hours on, and science is only just starting to grasp what's really happening under the ground, all the internet connections, and the reason why we've got such a diversity. Obviously, the greater the diversity above and below the ground, the more efficient an ecosystem can be. Although we've inherited this incredible jewel, we have a very poor history of looking after it, as we've heard a lot about today. Aboriginal people lived sustainably and in harmony with this environment for at least 65,000 years and likely even more. They looked after the land and the land looked after them. I remember talking to an Aboriginal fellow and he was saying, "We don't own the land owns us," and I think he's quite right. When Europeans arrived, the traditional owners were displaced, terrible massacres occurred. Their long successful association with the land was totally ignored. To add salt to the wound, authorities managed to cover up the Aboriginals' true lifestyle and land management. This was done to portray the first people as wandering nomads with no connection with the land. If anybody's read Bruce Pascoe's book, The Dark Emu, you'll start to see some of the truths that have been hidden and are starting to come out now. It's an incredible read, and I think that should be standard reading in schools. In less than 180 years, the student ecosystem's been decimated and fragmented, resulting in the small amount that's currently left. A huge amount of the southwest was cleared with little or no knowledge of what it originally contained. So a vast amount of species were probably lost before they were even known to science. Some shires have as little as 5%, and looking at the posters today, it's even lower than 5%. I saw a 4.3. It's amazing. Way back in 1996, the National State of the Environment report showed that biodiversity loss was the most important issue in regard to our environmental decline. So why does it still continue today? History shows various reasons for overclearing in the past. Short-sightedness and stupidity of government policies, such as opening up new land at any cost. And I've had relatives that had new land that tried desperately to save areas they could see were unique or were going to be preventing salinity and all that sort of thing. But they were told they had to clear it or they forfeited the land. There's been poor planning for the future. We've got some quite pristine reserves. There are still a few around. But there was no planning to connect these reserves with each other, or little or no connection planned. The Brand Highway was probably one that was a little bit more planned. There's quite a decent corridor there. Over the time, weak environmental laws have resulted in much illegal clearing. No, sorry. Also, much of the past clearing was done to provide road and rail networks, and we've heard a fair bit about both of those today, and also space for housing and industry. I'll get back to the road network shortly. History is going to judge us harshly if we don't act to curb and hopefully halt the continuing decline of what we have left. I like to compare the decline of our natural ecosystems to the dismantling of a house. We start off with a house that's very nice to live in, and then we decide to start pulling it down. The house gives us plenty of protection from the elements, and it does everything that a house should do. Then we start by taking off the doors and the windows. Now the wind can come through. It's still a reasonable spot to live, but it's starting to get a bit breezy. Then we carry on and we remove the roof cladding. Now the elements can get in and there's hardly any protection at all. We've still got the roof timbers up there, but and so the house still has the basic shape of a house, but it's not functioning as a house. Then we take the roof timbers off and all we're left with is the walls. It's hard to recognise it as a house now, and then we start to dismantle the walls by taking out all the bricks that don't really appear to be needed. Until we get down to that last brick, we pull that out and the whole thing comes tumbling down. I'm extremely concerned that we're very close to pulling that last brick out of our environment. So what are some of the benefits of retaining our natural ecosystems and the biodiversity they contain? We've heard a lot of them today already. There's shelter and home for the vast array of birds, animals, insects, spiders, and all these sort of things provide free pest control. Healthy vegetated areas provide a much better water retention, and it is retained right where it falls. Vegetation provides a windbreak to help reduce drying and damaging winds. A healthy vegetation helps moderate extremes in temperature. And biodiversity in areas of vegetation can be important for future scientific research into future uses for plants above the ground and the vast biota below the ground. We already have all sorts of medicines and foods, etc., and who knows what is yet to be found. There's a book on biomimicry, if anybody's read that. There's some incredible things that we can use these days that are copying what's already been happening in nature. Vegetation along rivers and creeks provide an effective filter to help prevent excess agricultural nutrients and chemicals from entering and polluting our waterways. Vegetation, of course, helps combat climate change, and vegetated areas help produce rain. Water vapour from the vegetation eventually forms clouds, and of course the clouds form rain. Fully discuss all possible solutions to combat the rapid decline of our biodiversity is way beyond the time available in a forum such as this. We'd be kidding ourselves if we think there's any easy solutions, but I'll outline a few things that I feel would start to address some of the problems. Proper environmental assessment before any clearing. Now I'm talking roadsides, fence lines and paddock trees. Stronger environmental protection laws, and these need to be enforced. A lot of the weak laws we've got now are open to all sorts of interpretations. Pressure needs to be applied to government to put more funding into land care. There are some wonderful people in natural resource management with brilliant projects just falling by the wayside because of lack of funding. As individual land owners, we can protect future natural assets on our own land by placing a conservation covenant on the bushland. If anybody's interested in conservation covenants, I'm quite happy to have a little chat afterwards with our experience. We need to engage more with the original custodians of the land. And thankfully, the knowledge and wisdom of the original Australians is gradually being recognised. A key area to protection of our unique biodiversity is education. We need people to understand and want to protect our natural assets. I'm sure if most land managers understood the full value of our natural diversity, there'd be far less destroyed. The main ones I'm talking about here, of course, are shires, main roads, mining, and farmers. Ignorance is not an excuse. School curriculums from early primary right through to year 12 could place far more emphasis on learning about our natural biodiversity. After all, they're our future managers. And finally, we need effective corridors, and we've talked a little bit about corridors already today. And I've picked this point to discuss a little bit further. Connection between remnants is vitally important to allow for genetic diversity, a pathway for pollinators, seed dispersal, and a pathway and a home for wildlife in general. Corridors also spread the availability of beneficial organisms to adjacent farmland. I've heard common stories of people with cropland up against bushland not having to spray insecticides. On my own farm, I have never had to spray any insecticides where there's bushland. All the predators are living in the bushland. I also had land that was about 1.5 kilometres from the nearest bushland, and that land often got cutworm and budworm and all that sort of thing in it. So they're important to allow these beneficial organisms to survive. Road reserves often provide convenient, although very narrow and not very effective corridors between remnants. The natural species remaining on road verges, though, give us a good idea of what would have been growing on the surrounding land, so we could enhance these road verges with much wider adjacent corridors. When I was young, roadsides contained an almost unbroken line of vegetation on the verges. I can remember going from, well, Gamelling's where I grew up, to Dongra, up through areas, you know, the inland road, Ingadew and whatnot, and I can remember it almost being a constant line of bushland along the road. Driving up that road now, it looks very sad. Gradually over time, due to careless, often deliberate use of fire and unlawful clearing by landowners and the Shire roadworks, this valuable asset has declined. Sadly, many road verges are so degraded that there's little or no clue as to what they originally contained. What really alarms me and many others is the fact that the remaining healthy verges are still disappearing at an alarming rate. Many excuses are put forward why this still happens, but hiding behind safety is a very popular one. It would solve the problem if the destroyers put as much effort into finding excuses to preserve the roadside vegetation instead. To help address the rapid decline of road verges in my shire, in the Darren Shire, we now have a Road Verge Management Advisory Committee. This was started in 2002 when I was infuriated by the total clearing of 1.5 kilometres of healthy road verge right up to the farmer's fence line. Then to be told by the works foreman what I was worried about, it was only that scrubby stuff. It showed that we had a problem. After much to and fro letter writing with the Shire, it was decided to get David de Lamont from State Roadside Conservation Council to address a meeting with the Shire. The result was a local road verge management policy and a road verge management committee set up. This was made up of the Shire CEO of the time, the works foreman, 2 councillors, the local land care coordinator and myself. This worked well for some time, with many visits to roadsides, discussing what needed to be done, and we had pretty good outcomes there. However, over time there was a change in CEO. We lost our land care coordinator, council members changed, I got too busy with our revegetation nursery, and our roadside committee was largely forgotten. Then, with the current spate of excessive roadside damage in our shire, it became obvious that the roadside committee needed to be revamped. Now due largely to the tireless commitment and pushing from Lynn Phillips, who's here today, we now have a new road verge management advisory committee made up with Lynn and myself, along with the works foreman, one councillor and 2 members of the general public. As we have no land care coordinator, outside expertise can be brought in. Our next scheduled meeting is October to discuss the 2019 works program, so that will give us plenty of time to assess the various roadsides involved and hopefully prevent any unnecessary future damage. We will then have a basic road verge that can be enhanced with wider corridors in the future. It seems these valuable roadside corridors are coming under increasing pressure statewide, so I recommend setting up similar programs in your local areas. If you'd like to know more how we did it, Lynn and I are here today, so catch us afterwards. Hopefully, as a result of symposiums such as this, people power will eventually halt the decline of our unique biodiversity. Then we'll be known as the generation that saved our remaining natural environment, not the generation that caused its extinction. Hopefully, scenes like this are things of the past and confined to history books, and scenes like this are more common. Thank you.